Hey, welcome back to the channel. I'm Espen Kraft. And let me just start by saying that you should never take any synth advice from someone not making original music with his or her synthesizers. Don't trust posers on YouTube. You know exactly who I'm talking about. Here are 8 synths that I never ever want to play again, and if I see any of them again, it'll be too soon. First up, the Alesis SQ6. I had it for a couple of years. It was part of a trade deal I did back in the 90s. But I hated the buttons, the feel of the keys, and pretty much everything coming out of that synth sounded like molasses dunked in cow shit. Get rid of it while you can. I had to hire an exorcist to get mine out of the house, actually. Number 2, the Roland D5/D10/D110, the module. The module was my first multi-timbral sound module back in the late 80s, and I used it a lot. So much, in fact, that I died a little after a couple of years using it. But it taught me the virtue of learning your gear inside out. It taught me a lesson in that regard. But the sound today is very stale. I don't like it at all. And I never want to see it again like ever. Number 3, the Ensoniq Fismo. This has amassed a cult following over the years. It commands a lot of money on the used market, but the sound it produces is a cold one, it's a brittle one, it's a glassy one, and its pink color and everything. It's a bit like sniffing your mother-in-law's underwear in secret. It's enticing at first, but you'll soon get kind of sick of it, and you'll regret ever starting doing it. So the Ensoniq Fismo, I cannot recommend that if you want to have a sane and fruitful life. The 4th entry, the Korg 707 from the late 80s, Korg's awkward, cheap attempt of getting in on making a cheap and cheerful FM synth at the time. It's cheaply made, it feels cheap, sounds are very thin and very dull, nothing enticing about it at all. The 707 is better suited as landfill today. Number 5, the Yamaha SY22. Now this is Yamaha's, or was Yamaha's, attempt at going at vector synthesis in the early 90s. And it has some nice sounding string sounds, I'll give it that, but that's pretty much all it got. It's very contrived in its user interface, and it's not very fun to play with at all, and it lacks the charming lo-fi sound of a vector synthesizer like the Akai K1, for instance. So if you're going for or headed towards the vector synthesis road from the early 90s, go for the Korg Wave Station instead, much better. So the Yamaha SY22, let that one go. Number 6, the Casio VZ-1. Now don't confuse this with the FZ-1 line of samplers from Casio. They're great, but the VZ-1, not so much. Casio was fired up on their success of the CZ series of synthesizers, the Cosmos synthesizers. So they wanted to up everything, and the VZ-1 was the synth to do it, but it failed spectacularly. It's a bomb, really, and not in a good way. On paper, it has everything going for it, but it's extremely tedious to program, and the sound has really nothing going for it. So the VZ-1 is a dog with fleas. Stay clear or you'll get infected. The 7th synth on the list is the Akai AX60. One of Akai's first synths, and boy, it looks cool. On paper, its specs are very impressive, but it's all smoke and mirrors. It has very little going for it. First of all, the sound, it's totally dead, cold, lifeless. I guess if you're into, or if you're going to make the music for your local necrophilia convention, I'll guess it'll get the job done. But unless you're into necrophilia, I suggest you look elsewhere for your next vintage synth. And finally, the 8th synth on my list of synths I never want to see or play again. And this is any synth that has the letters GM on it, General MIDI. Everything coming out of a GM synth sounds like Czechoslovakia children's TV from the early 90s. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but that's probably not the sound you're going for, and definitely not a sound you should be doing if you're doing anything but mimicking children's TVs from Czechoslovakia from the early 90s. Today, GM synths are much more suited as instruments of torture. You don't have to agree with every entry on my list, of course. Maybe you have other synths you think deserves a place in the Hall of Shame. What's your favorite synth to hate and why? Please let us know in the comments below. As always, I'm Espen Kraft. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Cheers.